Hey everybody, welcome back to Off the Wall. I'm Mike.
I'm Sol.
And I'm Bogz.
And we're talking about episode 4 of Ms. Marvel. We had some travel, we had some flashbacks, we had some really, really spicy food, and some surprise action that just kind of happened out of nowhere. But all in all, I think this was a very good episode. Boggs, what about you? How'd you feel?
Yeah, another fun episode. Obviously traveled to Pakistan, which is nice to see, and meeting some new kind of fresh faces and stuff. And yeah, of course, the dialogue continues to impress me. The mix of culture, religion, which we'll talk about. But I don't know. Some of the action I didn't love. Some of the story narratives were probably my least favorite out of every episode so far. I still enjoyed it, but if I'm going to be critical, I think it was the most I can pick at in terms of things that just didn't work for me or didn't sit well with me. Or things I just had to, just kind of forget and go over. It didn't have as much charm as the previous episodes, I feel. So, but overall, I did enjoy it, to be honest. It just wasn't as strong as the other episodes.
Yeah, this was a very kind of grand plot heavy episode. And the action wasn't my favorite, but again, if that's the biggest criticism I have, then I think we're in pretty good hands. So what about you? How'd you feel?
I really liked this episode, but I think too, if I were to put it rank it out of the 4 episodes we got, this would be at the bottom. But I think I've said this when Mandalorian or if each episode's like a 5 out of 5 and then you get like a 3.5 or a 4 out of 5, it's still a good episode. It's just not hitting the expectation and the greatness of the other episodes. And like you guys, yeah, it's the action really for me in this episode. Whenever she's with her family, which like the previous episodes, I love those parts. But yeah, the action, or as I put it, the jump action instead of a jump scare, because it's not a scary movie. The jump action that happened in this episode, I was just like, okay, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, there was some times like the fight scene itself when she first is fighting Kareem, the guy who's credited as the Red Dagger.
Yeah.
It was like she was doing some really creative stuff with her powers, but I was like, where'd she pick that up? That was okay, cool. But no, the stuff with her and her family continues to be the absolute strongest of every episode of this entire show. I said in our private chat, and I said earlier, it's like I love her grandmother so much. Every scene she's in is fantastic. She reminds me so much of my own grandmother, frankly, and we're starting to get some more of this world building stuff going on with the red daggers and the planes of existence. Boggs, for you, how did you feel in terms of how they handled like the character development with the family and introducing the red daggers in this one?
A bit hit and miss, to be honest. So that's some of the things that I didn't love about the episode. So I think it's a very it's a family oriented show. But by that I mean it's not for adults, clearly, like totally, and it's not for kids specifically. It's like in that mid-range, and that mid-range I just call it like a family show, where it appeals to both, all kinds of generations really. And I feel like the addition, I think now it's getting, this episode, it left me feeling a little bit with the same feeling I had watching Loki and Moon Knight a little bit. By that is what I mean is, obviously you have the storyline for Kamala, but now you're getting with the whole superhero journey, but now you're getting the red daggers, the Jinn, the Nord, or the dimensions. It is getting a little bit hard to follow. Again, if it's a family story, just think, like, obviously I'm not, but thinking like if I was a 10-year-old watching this or someone younger, would I fully understand all of that? I don't think I would. I think I'd get a little bit lost in the story. So yes, it get a little bit too kind of open. I feel like now, but the core story, the character development, yes, I did definitely like the addition of her grandmother and kind of her mother's relationship, and her cousins. Yes, I definitely liked, seeing Pakistan, seeing her with the foods and everything like that, and just the kind of the general getting to know each other. I did kind of like her with the guy. Did you say, I forgot his name? The red dagger guy, the young guy.
Kareem.
Yeah, and
Yes.
Waleed, the leader guy that ended up dying later on in the episode. I did like all that, and I also quite like the way that they established the jinn a little bit. So obviously, the jinn in Islam and in the religion is quite an important, serious thing. And I'm glad they just separated that a little bit, where they said, I don't, I'm just paraphrasing, but Waleed said something like, the jinn here, in terms of this context, isn't anything to, or it's completely different to what you see in any religious text. And I was like a whew kind of thing, because I've seen them talk about it the last few episodes, and I was a bit anxious about how they're going to connect that to kind of the religion, but they've kind of separated that and said it's kind of a different thing. So I was quite thankful of that. But yeah, just the character development mixed in with the whole partition and history of Pakistan, that's super impressive for me. With someone who's kind of kind of well versed in that history and stuff. So seeing that partition and all of that to have a key integral part of the plot, again, I really like all that. So yeah, good character development is something, but the story development things I didn't totally love. Like I said, the dimension stuff and the Nord and the Jinn and the red daggers, is a bit too much going on there. But when they keep it simple, it's really good. It's when they're trying to, like I said, it feels too Moon Knighty, too Loki like, and I didn't like them shows. So yeah, if they keep the simple stuff, where they keep when they stick to the core of the story, keeping it simple about the culture, about the religion, about being her struggles as a superhero, I like that stuff.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get into the more formulaic MCU side of things,
right? Yeah,
now.
The Disney Plus show formulaic way, which I didn't.
Just because
really
now
like
we're over the halfway point, and it's like, okay, you guys have now 2 episodes left.
Mm-hmm.
Been kind of a constant issue is we take as good as the first 3 episodes were. Okay, well, we still have a story to tell. We're at the halfway mark, and we're now apparently in a huge full-blown flashback to the trains and partition, and I'm like, y'all don't have a lot of time left. We kind of gotta, if you're gonna do the story, let's get on, because now we want a whole episode. We didn't have anything with Bruno in this. She texted her friend once to see if they were okay, never got a response. Nothing with damage control. We had one brief scene which apparently damage control's facility is the easiest in the world to break out of, because holy crap.
But it looks like the Pentagon.
But it looks like the Pentagon, but she left her son behind. That kind of just went away. We haven't seen either of the damage control agents in a bit. And it seemed like they were putting them up pretty high at the beginning, and now they're just kind of gone. So I'm a little, as far as, like, to echo what Bogz said, everything with the characters, again, the family, all that, fantastic. Love it. I loved I love that they did with Pakistan what they did with Egypt and Moon Knight, which is they made it look like a fun place to be. A lot of times you'll see movies and stuff where they go to Egypt or they go to Pakistan or a Middle Eastern country or an Eastern Asia or whatever, and it's all just brown and not fun. And it's like, there are families of people who've lived here a long time, and they have fun, and there's vendors, and there's great places to eat. And so I'm glad that we're getting to put some character into these locations as well. But yeah, overall with the story, it's like suddenly she's with these red dagger guys, and he's got cool looking hologram things. He puts it up and then he takes it right back down. So I'm not entirely sure what it's a lot of engineering for something I'm going to look at for 5 seconds. So what about you? Where was, in terms of story development and character development, this one kind of being a little mismatched a bit? How are you feeling?
Yeah, and there, to like go to the gin of what Bogz was saying, like I think they said if Thor would have dropped in the Himalayas, they would have called him a gin too.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So like separating that. But yeah, and with the family, with the partition, I was telling Mike earlier today that when I watched it, I actually was tearing up a little bit, because just seeing people like just hunched up going into that train, and like just the stuff, I was just getting like flashbacks of stories of like just like coming to the US through Cuba, and like getting on those boats, and just like over capacity on the boats going the 90 miles, which is just a short from Cuba to Florida, which I'm like thinking, yeah, from India to Pakistan, that's just a short ride comparatively. But So I was just like, I was getting emotional in that scene, watching that at the very end. And I'm like, I'm probably going to be very emotional in the next episode if we're getting some more of this partition stuff. Because unfortunately, in the world, when you have these kind of traumas, they're kind of very similar. No, doesn't matter where in the world you're from. But yeah, the Red Dagger stuff in the comics, that character uh, knows their family really well. The Khan family actually lived with the grandmother in Karachi and then did like a foreign exchange thing to New Jersey and lived with the Khan family. So they're kind of changing his story up a little bit. The introduction was weird. Again, like it was the bringing him in and like, oh, action and just a weird. Although I did laugh, it would be like, how do you know I'm not Canadian? Because Iman Vellani is Canadian. So I was like,
true.
oh, that's,
Yeah.
I was like, that's pretty funny. But the stuff with Muniba and Sana, that conversation where like I just needed my mom, that tugged at my heartstring. The table scene with Muniba and Kamala, that tugged at my heartstrings. So like anytime it was family or it was just those kind of stories, them eating food out of a bag. Why is the best food out of a bag? Like all the time, wherever you go in the world.
Always.
Like if it's in a bag, it's delicious.
It is.
Yeah, there's a few things there I just want to mention because
please.
I completely forgot to mention some of them. So I actually laughed out loud when the Red Dagger guy initially said to Kamala, "Come with me if you want to live." I was like, "What?" Like, yeah, and I almost
I've
thought
always
he
wanted
said,
to say that.
yeah. I almost thought he said, "Do you trust me?" Like Aladdin.
Yeah.
I was like, "What?" Like, I had to rewind it. Like, what did I hear? So that was really witty. And yeah, some of the the scenes with the mother and the grandmother, like her massaging her feet.
Mhm.
You'll see that in every Pakistani household. You just will. It's just it's a cultural thing. You just respect your elders. It's like a it's a very common thing that they do. So yeah, it's obviously an Asian thing as well. But yeah, you just look after the elderly like that.
Mhm.
So that was really sweet. And yeah, just about the partition stuff as well. I mean, yeah, I believe the grandma mentioned it was the last train that she was on. So that looks like it was the last day. And, the grandma also mentioned it, there was obviously tension around the time amongst the different religions in India and obviously civil war happening. But obviously the British, like she said, the English were the ones that they were actually lawyers who, so they weren't politicians. They weren't experienced in this or anything like that. They literally decided in India where to split people, and they had to move. They provided, and then they up and left India as well. So they kind of left into it, and they had to give people deadlines and things like that. So so that stuff that on the trains, that wasn't one day. That went over a sustained period of time, and they had to leave, and all kinds of horrific things went in them train stations and around that time. Anything you can imagine in a war scenario, from looting to all kinds of horrible things. So yeah, if they touch any of that stuff, I mean, obviously we did see a little bit, the train stuff and how people get on top of trains, and that is kind of normal travel in India sometimes. People do travel like that, but obviously that was extreme, human kind of obviously exporting almost. And even I like the nice touches, of the rickshaws and the tuk-tuks and things like that. I mean, they're all over India, Pakistan, is how a lot of people travel. And even the bus that they were, I mean, for some reason, in India, Pakistan, they have buses like that, and they even have them here in the UK, like people hire them for weddings and things like that. So it was a nice little touch, even though they could have just took a car. They just obviously took the rickshaws and stuff. That was funny. And obviously eating out of the bag. I didn't know that until I went to India myself. You get all kinds of food in bags like that, because as well as they really are good with recycling there. So they don't use paper a lot. So some stuff comes in bags, even milk comes in bags like that. It's crazy. So,
and that's in South America, Latin America as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it was super interesting. And just her eating the hot food, and obviously her being a foreigner, obviously, and
Mhm.
struggling and stuff. Yeah, it's really, really, and obviously you mentioned there, so any kind of family that's been involved in being a refugee or being an expat or traveling to another country or asylum seekers or come from a country of war can all kind of relate to these stories. So yeah, definitely it has a broad appeal. So yeah, and hopefully he's educating people, and showing them different walks of life. And like I said, I understand if you don't like, I've said in previous reviews, I understand if you don't like or not interested in this kind of stuff, but if you are, it's really eye-opening that the MCU and Marvel are brave enough to do this kind of stuff. So yeah, that stuff they're really getting right. But obviously we'll talk about the action stuff, but which I wasn't really a fan of. But yeah, sorry, I hijacked the conversation
No,
there.
no,
No,
everything you said is I think is very important. It's yeah, there's a lot, and I think that's why I'm enjoying part of why I'm enjoying the show so much as an American white guy who, like, yeah, my family came over from Ireland, like my grandfather came over from Ireland, but for him it wasn't as something as like partition where people were being like forced out of where they live and having, it was he decided to come to the States. He got on a boat. He came to the States. It was, was it tough for him? Yeah. But I mean, people obviously had it way worse and left for different reasons. So I think that's why I've enjoyed the show so much is because there's a lot. I'm learning so much, and then also having Bogz here to explain stuff as well. When we do these reviews, there's so much that can be learned from a show like this. That's why I think it's so
Definitely.
important.
And you just reminded me of something, Mike. Also people didn't want to leave. People were
Yeah.
obviously had the whole lives there. Some were rich, some were poor, and it obviously showed you like the kind of buildings they had when they moved across. So some of them might have had mansions and then gone to obviously like a derelict building. And yeah, I forgot I was going to make another point as well, but I forgot.
that's the same too. Like of like the rich people that lived in Cuba that were able to come. Like there was doctors and lawyers and people that lived in mansions that became maids and like were living in apartment buildings, and they didn't speak the language. They didn't have any money. They basically had to live a very poor life after living a very rich one in their country.
Yeah,
Well,
and I do remember now. So the where they also mentioned I think the grandma mentioned I kind of slipped my mind again, but
Was it the apartments with the cousins when they were like, oh, these are where all the old people live, the oldest apartments in Karachi?
No, there was another point as well. Sorry, I remember in a second. Sorry, let's carry on.
No, you're good. I think it's actually, there was a moment where when they're going around shopping and the guy takes her picture and he's like, it's 1,500 rupees. And at first you're like, holy shit. Like, but you got to remember is like, that's $20 in US dollars. And so whatever money that her and her mom probably came over with, it's crazy to think about sometimes. I had the same thought when I was watching Squid Game, because they were, the guy was going in and betting what's millions of the currency there, which in the States translated like $100. So it's again, it just gets into that. There's so much to learn from a show like this. But in terms of this is an MCU show. There was some action and all that in this. And yeah, I think it just I think because the other stuff is so good that it kind of makes that formulaic MCU stuff really stick out like a sore thumb. The chase, the kind of Jason Bourne-esque chase through the city streets and all that, like, it was neat, but given everything else happening in the episode, the moments with the mom and the grandmother, or with Kamala and her mom, and ending the way we do with this huge partition flashback, it just felt like kind of an outlier. And like, it was just kind of just there to remind everybody, don't forget, this is a superhero show. Don't forget that this is an MCU show. So Saul, I'm not sure if you felt the same way or not, or because I know you were one of the first ones to mention, like, yeah, like it was just kind of jump action stuff.
Yeah. So with the clandestine, I was like, I would have loved from when they were breaking out the Pentagon, basically, if they would have showed them in Karachi before they jumped through the ceiling. Because it's like you're having this exposition dump moment with the red daggers, and then through the ceiling, here they are. Like, let's action now. So it felt kind of like there was such a big tonal shift. It's like, oh, we're going immediately from exposition to now action with no like good transition between the two. And that was the same too with when she jumped over to like look at the older part of the train station, and then Karem like there, and it was just like, okay, action now. Like there was not any good transition. It was like, oh, now we see a dagger flying past her face. And so I don't know what I would have made it better, what kind of transition, but it just seems so out of place.
It did, yeah, especially because of how quick and then how it started and how quick it stopped. You
Yeah.
know, he first attacks her in the train station. He's fighting. I got to stop you. And then they just kind of get past it like really quick.
Oh, let's leave together. Yeah.
And I would have liked, if I would have liked, again, I know I'm saying this knowing that we don't have many episodes left, but I kind of would have liked more time spent with her, with them learning things.
Yeah.
It's kind of done a little montagey because it's like we're there and then they're at a campfire and then we're there and then we're back at grandma's house and then we're there and then I was like, spend some time here. Let me live here a little bit. I didn't really.
It looked really cool. We should have been there longer.
Yeah, I would have rather like foregone some of the earlier action stuff and just had the more time spent with the story stuff, and then had maybe the one big action set piece, but had enough time to spend to where it kind of we had our fill of everything else. Now we can get this kind of palate cleanser action sequence, whereas it just kind of felt a little scattered here and there. Bogz, I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, so before I address the action, I do remember the point that I was going to say. So it was something that the grandma mentioned. I don't remember word for word what she said, but just about the whole kind of partition thing again, and having she's mentioned, so in her lifetime, or the end partition scene, everyone there is Indian. Okay, so it was, and she mentioned, the English decided, okay, this is the border, move across, whatever. So, and she mentioned all this is because of what the English done, kind of thing. So, and how people are so passionate about this stuff, and obviously excluding kind of the partition and what happened there, it is crazy that people are so passionate about these kind of these nations and imaginary lines in sand where 70 years ago that wasn't there. And they did mention that subtly in the show, where this has all come about because of kind of that time. And I was like, wow, like they're actually addressing why people are so they're all the same people, but that they had these whole issues. So these are big broad topics that they're just touching on, and I'm like super impressed with that. But anyway, the action, yeah. So to be honest with you, I don't really like her powers because I don't understand them. I don't 100% know what she can and can't do. As well, when she was with the Red Dag guy, and where she's kind of using the armor and her big hands, and she's using the platforms of the glass thing, and he's just like cutting them with a knife, and she's falling, and like, yeah, it's a little silly. And then with the whole chase scene stuff, yeah, it was nice to see the rickshaw and that kind of stuff and the tuk-tuks. But I was literally thinking the whole time, you could have just jumped in a car, or you could have took a car. And I'm glad that she did get a van. And obviously we had that callback of the first episode where she has Bismillah and then reverses and then ruins that guy's whole business with the drinks and everything. That poor guy. Yeah, that was probably his whole livelihood gone there. He's, oh, sorry. And then she runs the guy over and stuff. So I found the whole chase scene just really goofy, and the kind of action in between that as well. And then with the whole kind of Jin, the elderly lady being like super proficient. It's great that an elderly lady can get action scenes, sure, but I just found it really like unbelievable and very formulaic Disney Plus, as you said, Mike, like standard action scenes that you see in all these series. I just really wasn't totally just obviously impressed, or that's just the action there. I was just no, I was just not feeling that. And like I said, they're the biggest criticisms I've had so far. And I could have done without all of that stuff. And yeah, it was. I didn't. Yeah, like I said, didn't enjoy the chase scene. Didn't enjoy the fighting. And yeah, I'm not totally on board with her powers, but I did like that lead character and you know how he kind of how he died and stuff. But yeah, you can miss me out with the action stuff. It's not
you mentioned
not too involved, not too invested in that side.
Yeah. Go ahead,
I
Saul.
have what is it? I wrote down too what Sana said there because I was like, this is so interesting. Where she goes, my passport is Pakistani, my roots are India, and in between all of this, there's a border. There's a border marked with blood and pain. People are claiming their identity based on the idea of an old Englishman.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like she was Indian once in her lifetime, and you know her father was Indian, and her father, their father, and their families were all Indian, and then a week later you're Pakistani and you're super, you know, passionate about Pakistan. These are it's just so.
It wasn't Bangladesh also Pakistan as well.
Yeah, so there was East and West Pakistan. So there were the kind of sides of India. So they were what the British decided. Like, yeah, you can have that bit. You Muslims go over there. You Muslims go there. And then the ones that didn't want to move stayed in India. So it was all, it's a big mess, to be honest. But yeah, people are obviously, there's no disrespect to you. People are obviously passionate where they come from. You know, of course, they're your countries. You have a right to it. But when you do think about it further, it's super interesting. And again, I'm really impressed that they're actually dealing with it in the show. And again, even if you're just a casual MCU fan, are you going to pick up this stuff? Are you going to know about this stuff? But it is trying to educate. And even if you're not, it's people like me. I'll pick it up and I'm fully impressed with it. So
it's interesting, like, because you're Muslim and then like your family stayed in India. I would assume, like, yeah, they stayed on that side of the border.
Yeah, they were like, well, they live right on the border, but near the border anyway. But yeah, obviously my other kind of half the family's from Africa as well. So yeah, a bit of a mix. But yeah, they kind of didn't get involved, luckily, in any of that. So, but you know, I know a lot of people that did, and yeah, and even like my friends who are obviously, you know, ultra passionate Pakistanis, their grandfathers were Indian. Like it is super crazy to, you know, talk about and think about and what they kind of went through in their lifetimes. And yeah, but the show's dealing with it, and I can't believe it's an MCU show. You know,
and it's got me wondering, because we end the episode with her living this flashback at the trains, so it's got me wondering, kind of like how with Moon Knight, how the 5th episode was a very emotional delve into Mark and Steven's past. Is next week's episode going to be a heart-wrenching look at just how traumatic and emotional and just historical this whole event was? Is that going to be kind of what we're going to see next week? Because that kind of seems like what we're setting up for. Soul, is that the vibe you're getting, or are you picking up on something different?
I think next week is all going to be in the past until like the final end, or we'll probably get a end credit scene or mid credit scene. But I feel like we're going to be in the past, which is very interesting in a 6-episode series. I know we've spoke about this a whole bunch of times. Is that each Marvel series has very great beginnings, very interesting 5th episodes, but they leave with a lot of stuff to then wrap up in the 6th episode. And each time they haven't really stuck the landing. And like, I enjoyed Moon Knight. I didn't like the last episode. I enjoyed Loki. I didn't like the last episode. I enjoyed Falcon and Winter Soldier, but then I didn't like the last episode, so that ended up being like the least favorite of mine. And that's just been the same thing for all these Marvel shows on Disney Plus, is that it's just the last episode, even in WandaVision. So I'm really, really hoping for this series that's not the case.
Yeah, it seems, and again, I think I've gone back and looked the shows where they let them have more episodes, whether it was WandaVision, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, where they got to have 7, 8, 9 episodes. their endings, whether you liked it, they tended to be stronger.
Yeah.
You know, this I don't know why they've suddenly decided to hold to this 6-episode mold with their last few shows, but it's just not enough. They're setting up for too much.
And they're not doing the full hour either. Like
Yeah.
if they did the full hour, that it might be better.
If it was a full hour or more episodes or both, either way, but it's like this is your platform. This is not like you're on network and are restricted to a certain amount of minutes per week. It's like you can put however long a show you want on here. It's a curious choice. And yeah, once again, it's like, okay, we've got a landing to stick here, and we're about to spend what looks like an entire episode in the past. But Bogz, as far as that goes, spending an episode living in this flashback like this, is that something you think we're heading for? And how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm here for it. How in depth or how much time they spend there, I don't know. I do definitely want to get some resolution with her great grandmother Aisha character. That's been teased since the first episode. We haven't really got any more from that. Obviously, we've got a flashback of her for a scene, but their involvement, that's been kind of teased, and her grandmother and things like that. And obviously, she's not to be spoken about. We don't know why. Need to get some more of that. And see how this kind of bangle how it's got its power. We haven't got any of that. They haven't touched any of that stuff, but hopefully in the next episode they do. On top of that, dealing with the partition stuff and seeing, quite frankly, the horrors that occurred during that. Will they do that stuff? I don't know. They might I'm hoping they do, but I just can't really see a Disney Plus, although they have impressed me a lot, this show, but I want them to, but whether they will or not, I mean, there's so many things going on here. I don't know if they'll spend that much time doing that. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's interesting last few episodes. Obviously, she has a lot of stuff at home as well to deal with, and there's only a couple of episodes left, so hope so. But how these Disney Plus shows have gone so far, I've been really, really, really disappointed in them. So my hopes aren't too high, but that's probably a good thing, because I'll be pleasantly surprised. So, which I have been with this show, this series so far.
Something else to consider with that too is kind of like with Loki, where Loki ended with a cliffhanger style episode on purpose, A, because it was setting up for its own season 2, and B, for something else that's probably going to play out in the MCU at large as well.
Kind of started already playing out.
It already has. Something to keep in mind is that this show is supposed to be setting up for the Marvels, which is the Captain Marvel sequel, whatever you want to call it. And supposedly this show was supposed to be building up to something to do with that. So do you think it's possible the show could end with a bit of a cliffhanger
100%.
as opposed to a full resolution, because whatever we're dealing with here is going to have bigger consequences for that movie? Obviously, Soul, you just said.
Yeah. With the way the Disney Plus shows have been, I think they really have taken, because people would joke that all of the MCU movies is just a long TV show that leads up to the next one. But each of the movies had their own story and resolution. But I think they heard that joke by us fans, and now they're like, oh, we don't need resolution because you're always going to go and watch the next thing. And that's been the thing with all the Disney Plus shows. So yeah, 100%, there's going to be stuff that is not solved by the end of the show that is gonna maybe be touched on in the movie, maybe not. Might be touched on in another property, so it might be touched on in Secret Wars, because I know that's coming up. So I know they're playing we're gonna tie everything together, but I think they need to go back to, yes, things tie together, but it's still one story that has a start and an end. They really haven't been doing that lately with the Disney Plus shows.
Yeah, and Bogz, on that same point to you, obviously the same question is, do you think that's a possibility? But also, do you think that's a good idea, or do you think it would benefit them more to keep the... I mean, obviously we know she's going to show up in the Marvels anyway, but do you think it would benefit this show a bit more to have it be a bit more self-contained, or like how are you feeling about all that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff now going on. As I mentioned at the start, with all these kind of these plot points now, they're definitely going to leave it on a lot of cliffhangers. So I'm kind of expecting that even just the home stuff alone, like with her friends, her family, her powers, on top of that, you know, the Marvel, as in, you know, Miss Marvel show, whatever, the next with Captain Marvel, whoever, Monica Rambeau and stuff, all their story, and then with the whole kind of Pakistan stuff as well, and the dimensions and this, and it seems to be it's at the point now where I feel like it's getting a little too much to deal with just a couple episodes left. So definitely there will be a lot of cliffhangers based on, again, how these Disney Plus shows go. But I want to be surprised, you know, if it is more closed and we do get a lot of answers, great. But I'm not expecting them. I'm unfortunately expecting it to go the formulaic route, where it will be a lot of cliffhangers, and they may be a bit of a disappointing ending, but hopefully I'm wrong.
I'm always open to be pleasantly surprised. You know, when it comes to world building at large, that's something that I still think that the MCU does pretty well, but sometimes how they build that world out is a bit hit or miss. And I think this is going to be an interesting, I'm really curious to see how this is going to end in terms of as a series, but also as a tie-in to everything else going on at large. Any other final thoughts we want to give here, Soul? Let's go to you first. Any final thoughts on the episode and on the show so far that you'd like to give?
The face that she was kind of giving Karim at the when they were eating the food out of the bag at like the fire, I'm like, you keep giving these looks to these boys, and these boys are kind of falling in love with you. So like, and now you got 3 kind of after you. So what you gonna do about that? So that's my little like fun side thing that I noticed.
You know what, Kamala, get it, girl. Do you? You're a freaking superhero. Do you? Bogz, how about you, man? Any final thoughts?
Yeah. I'll say Pakistan Zindabad. Any Pakistanis watching, and yeah, it's I continue to smile at every Muslim or Arabic name or reference I hear or see, because you know, in no other MCU kind of property or really superhero property like that, you just don't really see that stuff. And you know, it does make me smile. Whether obviously you do get a lot of, you know, diversity and whatever, whether if it's Latino or African American, let's say, or European, but their names and things like that are not, you know, will be Christian names, right? So every time you do hear like Waleed or like, you know, this name, or I was like, oh, like it's kind of really surprising. And when you hear them say like Bismillah and stuff, so yeah, I'll do, for that alone, for me, it's worth the price of admission. So yeah, I kind of secretly backing the show, but yeah, hopefully finishes strong. 2 episodes left, and I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Again, nitpicks aside here and there, the show made me laugh. It warmed my heart. It hit me in a lot of different ways, and it continues to teach me things that I then get to come here and ask you questions about and have you inform us as well. And just, yeah, the show's been a great cultural learning experience for me, and I continue to just look forward to the next week's episode. So which is a weird thing to say considering what it looks like we're heading for. So I'm interested to see how they tackle this, but let us know what you guys thought down in the comments. Did you like the episode? Did you not like it? Are you curious about where they're going? But let us know on Twitter as well. Our Twitter stuff's all down in the description. You can like and subscribe and check out everything else we have here. We just did our Man from Toronto review and our review of the Baymax series on Disney Plus. It's freaking adorable. Go watch it. Not you, Bogz, you won't like it. But it's a kid show. But let us know what you think. And in the meantime, we'll be back again real soon with something else here on Off the Wall. So take care, everybody.